96.99%, that's the number Tanzania's state television announced for President Samia Hassan in 8 constituencies. Not 65%, not 85%, nearly 97%. Now I need you to think about something. Even if you loved a leader, genuinely love them, would you and 96 out of every 100 people you know vote the exact way? And here is what makes this whole thing fascinating. The 2 people who could actually challenge President Hassan, they weren't on the ballot. One is in prison, the other was disqualified just some few days before the election. And when Tanzanians tried to protest, their internet went dark, their phones stopped working, the militaries rolled into the streets, and according to some reports, over 700 people were unalived in just 3 days. But here is the question nobody's asking. How did they pull this off? And more importantly, how did they think they would get away with it? Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you isn't just about Tanzania. This is about a pattern being played across the continent right now. Now, let me take you back to 2021. President John Magufuli, Tanzania's leader, dies suddenly. His vice president Samia Hassan takes over, and people were hopeful, genuinely hopeful. She was Tanzania's first female president. She promised to open up the political space. She talked about transparency. For a moment, it looked like Tanzania might be turning a corner. But power has a way of revealing who people really are, doesn't it? By 2023, opposition politicians started disappearing, not metaphorically, literally disappearing. The UN alone documented over 200 cases since 2019. The Tanganyika Law Society confirmed 83 abductions just under Hassan's presidency, and another 20 in weeks just before the elections. Now, here is where it gets tactical. In April 2025, Tanzania's main opposition party, Chadema, gets officially barred from the election. The reason? They refused to sign an electoral code of conduct. Now think about that. The ruling party writes the rules. The opposition says these rules aren't fair, and the ruling party says, well, then you can't play. It's like showing up to a football match and the referee says, by the way, I am also playing for the other team, and if you complain, you are disqualified. But it gets worse. Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader who actually had a chance, he gets arrested at a rally. The charge, treason. His crime, calling for electoral reforms and free elections. Now let me say that again. Asking for fair elections was treated as betraying the nation. And just days before the election, Luhaga Mpina from ACT Wazalendo, the second largest opposition party, gets disqualified too. The Attorney General objected to his candidacy. So when election day arrived on October 29th, 2025, President Hassan was running against 16 people. But here is the thing, they were all from tiny parties that barely campaigned. No billboards, no rallies, no real challenge. This wasn't an election. This was performance. Now, quick question. If you knew the outcome of an election, would you even bother voting? Election day, 7 a.m., polls open across Tanzania, and almost immediately, something strange starts happening. People pull out their phones to share photos of voting. Nothing loads. They try WhatsApp, nothing. Facebook, nothing. Instagram, nada. All there. NetBlocks, the organization that monitors internet freedom globally, they confirmed it. there was a nationwide internet shutdown. Connectivity dropped to nearly 90% below normal levels. Now, why does this matter? You see, in 2025, the internet isn't just about scrolling TikTok. In Tanzania, people use mobile money for everything, sending remittances, running businesses. When you shut down the internet, you are not just blocking information, you are shutting down people's livelihood. One payment company, Nala, reported their entire operations was frozen. Thousands of people couldn't send money to their families, and small businesses couldn't even process small transactions. It was economic warfare described as security. But here is what authoritarians always underestimate: people adapt. Protesters switched to Zello, a walkie-talkie app that works on weaker connections. They organized in real-time coordinated marches, sharing information about military positions. Gen Z in Tanzania, just like in Kenya early this year, proved that you can cut the internet, but you can't kill the movement. By afternoon, hundreds of people were in the streets. Salaam, the commercial capital, became a battlefield. Protesters burned a bus, a gas station. They attacked police stations, and one was burned on the ground on Nelson Mandela Road. Nelson Mandela Road, named after a man who fought oppression his entire life. And on that same road, Tanzanians were fighting their own battle for freedom. Now, here's what I want you to consider. When every peaceful avenue is blocked, when your candidates are jailed, your internet is cut, your voice is silenced, what option do you have? Wednesday evening, the government announced a curfew, 6 p.m. Everyone indoors, no exception. The Inspector General of Police, Camillus Wambura, made it clear: anyone on the streets after 6 would face consequences. But the people didn't really back down. Thursday, day 2, the protest continued. The military deployed to Dar es Salaam, actually soldiers with rifles setting up roadblocks across the city, tear gas in the streets, gunshots in the air, and according to Amnesty International, at least 2 confirmed deaths, a civilian and a police officer. But the opposition are saying something very, very different. They are claiming over 700 people have been unalived within 3 days. Now, I need to be clear about something. That number hasn't been independently verified. The internet blackout made it nearly impossible for journalists to confirm anything. But even if the real number is half that, or even a quarter, we are talking about a massacre. Now, these aren't statistics. These are people, fathers, mothers, students with dreams gone. Now, here is where the story gets even more interesting, because this isn't really about Tanzania anymore. At the Kenya-Tanzania border, a place called Namanga, something unusual started happening. Tanzanian protesters crossed into Kenya. They set up bonfires and started chanting anti-government slogans. They tore down President Hassan's election billboards. And then Kenyan youth crossed into Tanzania to join the protest. Think about that. Young Kenyans who just months ago were protesting their own government over tax hikes. They saw what was happening in Tanzania and said, we need to help. This is Pan-Africanism in real time, not the type you read about in history books, not the type in AU summits. This is young people saying, your fight is my fight. Your oppression threatens my freedom. But there is another angle here that people aren't really talking about enough. The internet shutdown didn't just affect Tanzania. It started hurting Kenya too. At the Namanga border post, cargo trucks couldn't clear customs because the digital systems were down. Traders on both sides started losing money. We're talking about millions of shillings in just 48 hours. The East African community likes to talk about integration and free movement of goods. But when one country goes dark, the whole region feels it. Now, let me show you something that should worry every single African leader right now. Tanzania isn't alone. In October 2025, the same month Cameroon held elections, President Paul Biya, who is 92 years old and has been in power for over 4 decades, won again. How? The main opposition candidates were blocked from running. Protests erupted, internet went dark, dozens arrested. Sounds familiar? Ivory Coast, same story. President Alassane Ouattara secured a 4th term. After opposition candidates were disqualified, the opposition boycotted, accusation of fraud everywhere. Senegal in 2024 saw massive youth-led protests after Ousmane Sonko was blocked from running. Internet blackouts, curfews, mass arrests. There is a playbook here and it's been copied across the entire continent. Step 1. Use legal mechanisms to eliminate real opposition. Disqualify candidates, arrest leaders on vague charges like treason or incitement. Step 2. Control information space. Shut down the internet during critical moments so people can't organize or share what's happening. Step 3. Deploy overwhelming force, military in the streets, curfews, live ammunition if necessary. Step 4. Present it as maintaining order and following the rule of law. What do you think happens when this playbook stops working? Now, before you go any further, I need to address something because there is another side to this story that we should at least consider. The Western response to Tanzania's election has been swift. The European Parliament issued a statement calling it neither free nor fair. They urged democratic partners to stand firm in defense of democracy and human rights. Strong words. But here is where it gets complicated. The Tanzanian government responded by essentially saying, "We are a sovereign nation. We govern ourselves by a rule of law. This is our business, not yours." And you know what? There is a conversation to be had about Western hypocrisy here, because let's be real. Europe and America have supported far worse leaders when it suited their interests. They backed Mobutu in Congo. They looked the other way in Rwanda. They still do business with dictators in the Gulf states. So when they suddenly care about democracy in Tanzania, you have to ask, is this genuine concern or is there something else going on? But here is the thing, and it's very important, even if Western motives are mixed, even if there is hypocrisy in their response, it doesn't change the fundamental reality on the ground. Tanzanians didn't take to the streets because the EU told them to. They are not protesting because of some Western conspiracy. They are protesting because their candidates were jailed, because their votes didn't matter, because when they tried to speak up, they were shot at. And honestly, I am glad the EU is finally saying something. I'm glad there is international pressure. Not because I trust Western intentions completely, but because maybe, just maybe, for once, the international community is siding with the people instead of the government. That's progress, even if it's imperfect progress. But here is what I really want to know. Where is the African Union? Where is the East African community? Where are our own institutions? Because if we are going to talk about sovereignty and non-interference, then African institutions should be the ones holding African governments accountable. But the EU have been silent, the East African community have been silent, and that silence is deafening. Now let me tie this all together for you, because what's happening in Tanzania is bigger than just one election. There are 37 million registered voters in Tanzania. That's a huge number, but turnout was very, very low. That's not apathy, that's protests. When you are offered a menu with one real option, choosing not to eat is a political statement. The CCM, Tanzania's ruling party, has been in power since 1961. That's 64 years. They have ruled longer than most Tanzanians have been alive. And somewhere along the way, they stopped seeing themselves as servants of the people and started seeing themselves as owners of the country. But here is what these old guard politicians don't understand. The generation coming up now is fundamentally different. Gen Z in Africa, they are digital natives. They saw what happened in Kenya. They watched protests in Nigeria. They learned from Sudan. They connected cross borders in ways their parents never were. When Kenya's government tried to silence protests earlier this year, young people organized on social media and shut down the capital. When Tanzania gets the internet, protesters switched to Zello and continued organizing. You can't rule people the same way anymore. The old playbook: control the TV stations, control the newspapers, jail opposition. It's breaking down because the real conversation is happening online, in encrypted chats, on apps the government doesn't even know exist yet. Now, I want you to imagine something with me. President Hassan is sitting in the State House right now. She's got her 96.99 results. She's got the military on the streets. She's got control. Or at least it looks like control. But here is what she also has: a population that doesn't believe the results. International condemnation, a tanking economy because the internet shutdown killed businesses. Regional neighbors who are nervous about regional instability spreading, and most importantly, hundreds of thousands of young people who now see the government as their enemy. That's not stability, that's a power keg. So here is the question: how long can you govern people who have withdrawn their consent? History gives us examples. We have seen it in Madagascar. We saw it in Burkina Faso. We saw it in Tunisia. When legitimacy is gone, when people stop believing in the system, regimes that looked unshakable can collapse surprisingly very fast. Now, I'm not predicting revolution. I'm not saying Hassan's government will fall tomorrow. But I'm saying the foundation is cracking, and when that starts, it's very hard to stop. Now, let me bring this home. What happened in Tanzania matters for 3 reasons. First, it exposes the blueprints we now see clearly: how modern authoritarian governments operate in Africa. It's not just about military coups anymore. It's about using legal system, digital control, and overwhelming force to create the illusion of democracy while gutting its substance. Second, it shows who has real power, and it's not the people who say they do. The government claims sovereignty and rule of law, but when 700 people are unalived for asking for their elections, those words are meaningless. Power right now belongs to whoever controls the guns and the internet. And third, and this is the most important one, it shows us the future of resistance. You see, the young people in Tanzania didn't wait for permission. They didn't ask for opposition leaders to tell them what to do. They organized themselves, they crossed borders, they adapted to the internet shutdowns. That's not just protest, that's a new kind of political consciousness emerging across Africa. And it terrifies the people in power because they can't control it the old way. So here is what I want you to take from this. when you see election results that look impossible, like 96.99%, don't just scroll. Ask questions. Who wasn't allowed to run? What happened to the people who protested? Where are the independent observers? And when you hear about internet shutdown during elections, understand what that really means. It means a government is terrified of its own people seeing what's actually happening. It also means they can't win a fair fight. The story of Tanzania is the story of a continent at a crossroads. On one side, you have entrenched power trying to hold on by any means necessary. On the other side, you have a generation that refuses to accept the world their parents inherited. We don't know how this ends, but we know it's not over. If this video changed how you see African politics, do me a favor, share it with someone who needs to see it. Hit the subscribe button because we are going to keep following this story and others like it across the continent. Now here is my question for you. What would you do if you were a young Tanzanian right now? Do you keep protesting knowing the risk? Do you leave the country? Do you wait for change? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. I'm Asongwe Luis, and this is the Strategic Lens on Africa Today. We are not just watching history, we are understanding it. See you in my next investigation. Bye.